Hey everybody, welcome back to the 6 round post-fight show with me, Zane Simon, and I'm all alone once again this week. Eddie Mercado picked just the exact right event to take another week off. I think he said he was going to a baseball game, which, I mean, he chose the Pirates, so I don't know. Did the Pirates win today? Maybe he made a terrible decision. But it was certainly a better decision than staying around and watching this card at home. No, the Pirates lost 10-4. So even that, though, feels like a better use of time than this deeply terrible card that the UFC put together. And headlined by a predictable but entirely lackluster version of Lerone Murphy versus Josh Emmett, whereby Murphy did not really get hurt once, and Emmett kind of ended up resigned to just trying to land his one big bomb over and over again while Murphy skirted around and picked him apart the way that pretty much everybody who has beat Josh Emmett picks him apart. The book on beating Josh Emmett has been pretty clear for a long time. Stay on your back foot, circle away from him, kick him, and keep on your jab. Don't overcommit to stuff. Murphy, I went into this picking Emmett, not because I didn't think the game plan wasn't there or that Murphy wasn't capable of following it, but just because Murphy always has a habit of making terrible momentary mistakes in his fights. He doesn't tend to seem to come into them with a game plan. He comes in usually just kind of looking to scrap it out and figure out what works as he goes, and that has gotten him hurt several times over the years. It got him nearly killed against Dan Ige in a way that looked exactly like the way that Josh Emmett knocked out Bryce Mitchell in his last fight. So I was willing to pick Emmett to get the Hail Mary knockout, but it was very much one of those, if Emmett doesn't knock him out, he's going to lose a decision, and he didn't, so he did. Solid win for Murphy. Keeps him on pace to rise up into the top 5 contenders area of the division. I mean, Emmett's not really there now, I think, coming off of the losses to Topuria and Rodriguez. That win over Mitchell keeps him top 10, but I don't know that Murphy winning is going to rocket him past other contenders in the division. Certainly, if I'm looking at the rankings right now for Murphy, let's see, featherweight. Yeah, Emmett's ranked 8th. And does this win put Murphy ahead of Arnold Allen? No, probably not. Movsar Evloev, no. Certainly not Diego Lopez. There's arguments to be made about Yair Rodriguez and Brian Ortega, but certainly if Yair can beat Pitbull coming up here at UFC 314, he'll probably stay well ahead of the likes of Allen and Murphy. But if he loses, then who knows? There could be some shakeup in there. Still, I think people worrying that this wasn't big enough or good enough for Murphy to really jump up keep momentum going up the division. I won't say jump because I just said he's not going to jump up the division, but to keep momentum going, I think Murphy's undefeated record is going to keep doing a lot of work for him, even if the wins don't feel special. He's a lot like Movsar Evloev in that way, where it didn't take a special win over Aljamain Sterling or a special win over Arnold Allen or even a special win over Diego Lopez. The fact that Evloev is undefeated has him in top 4, knocking on a potential title shot in the future. So I think Murphy keeps his momentum going just fine and probably sets himself up for a fight against somebody like Arnold Allen. Would be the matchup, or if the winner of Yair versus Pitbull, that would be great. Or if I mean, if Brian Ortega is still interested in competing and has to fight down off a loss, then you could do something like Ortega Murphy, and any of those things would be fine. So it'll keep him fighting somebody above him. It'll might even get him another main event for another terrible Apex card. No, Lord knows the UFC certainly has plenty of space to fill on all these events they're putting on. But God, it has to be said, walking away from this was just such an uninspired event from the UFC. There was one really truly good fight and stoppage in the whole card, in my opinion. Well, okay, there was fight that ended in a stoppage. I'll say that Victor Henry versus Pedro Falcao was a pretty good fight, but that's you're down to a bantamweight fight on the prelims. But the only reasonably well-booked fight that ended inside the distance and wasn't just a slog was Ode Osborne versus Louis Gurule. Pretty much everything else was either hilariously low level or just terrible to watch. For Emmett, he's coming now off, that really, he was talking about this is the momentum building to his last run to a title, but at 40, I gotta say, that was probably a pipe dream anyway, but this should have really put it to rest. And I don't really see, he'll bounce back to this. He could fight Brian Ortega. That'd be fun. He could fight Calvin Kattar again. I wouldn't mind seeing that. They had a good split decision, a fight that I think I felt Kattar won the first time. So if I'm booking Emmett right now, somebody saying, Adin Rosman saying, what about Emmett versus Chikadze? Chikadze is currently booked against David Onama. But so yeah, I would say if I'm booking Emmett right now, I'm booking him in a rematch against Calvin Kattar. That's a fight I thought that Calvin Kattar won the first time. So that would make sense as a rematch right now. It could be I mean, the UFC will probably make it a main event, but it could be a fun fight night co-main, a still meaningful fight for a couple older fighters on their way out. I think both guys would be interested and excited to take it again. So that's probably what I want to see. Somebody, Chad here, mentioning the bantamweight grapple fight was pretty good. It was pretty good for a really bad fight, is what I would say. Like, Chang Ho Lee did look good. Cortavius Romeus' game is terribly broken, but they made a good fight out of it. So it shouldn't. It's not a UFC level fight, but they had a good fight for it. Somebody said, mentioned Kattar is on a 3-fight. I don't care. What are you going to do with Calvin Kattar on a 3-fight losing streak? Do I need to see him get fed down the division? He's not going to make another run. He's in the late stages of his career. Emmett is 40. Feels like one of the only relevant fights they could have right now. Yes, I'm sure Emmett would like to fight Pitbull if Pitbull loses, but if I'm Patricio Pitbull and I lose my debut to Yair Rodriguez, I'm asking for fights with guys like Brian Ortega or Max Holloway or even Aljamain Sterling. I'm not taking Josh Emmett. So, yeah. If Brian Ortega wants to fight Josh Emmett too, that's fine. But I would do Emmett versus Kattar too. That feels like the fight to do with those guys, honestly. Otherwise, featherweight bout, Pat Sabatini, Joanderson Brito. I really hoped going into this that Joanderson Brito could find a way to win this fight. I knew he would be getting controlled for almost all of it. But my hope was in those few moments he would get to stand up, he would be able to hurt a very hurtable Pat Sabatini badly enough to win. Because I did not want to watch Joanderson Brito just get laid on for 15 minutes. This is a really big waste of Joanderson Brito. It's a solid win for Pat Sabatini. It gains him a little momentum. But yeah, somebody asking what the fuck happened to Brito. I mean, Brito's never been a smart fighter. He's never been a clever fighter. He's always a very just go out, scrap, don't care what your opponent can do, try to make whatever fight you can happen guy. And he's fighting guys that in his last couple fights that are actually composed and can do the thing that wins them fights for the entire fight. Brito fighting, we now know, coming off of oh god, what's his name? It's not helping the Frenchman. William Gomes. We now know from William Gomes' fight with Hyder Emil that Gomes is actually incredibly unflappable. But we've seen, so Brito, I have a lot more willingness to say that Brito failing and flailing in that fight has more to do with Gomes being so hard to throw off his game than I did at the time, where I really felt Brito just walked himself into the clinch over and over again. But and then in this fight, I got to give credit to Sabatini for sticking with his A game, for chain wrestling the hell out of Brito and pulling Brito into a fight where he's really poorly equipped to out-scramble a top control fighter as good as Sabatini when Sabatini is fighting to his best ability and isn't getting trapped on his feet. That said, Brito did have a clear opportunity to win this fight in the third, I thought, and just threw it away sub-hunting when Sabatini shot in on him. Terrible move. Terrible fight cue move from him. But whatever. Coming off of this, that could set up Sabatini for a fight with, I don't know, somebody like, let's see, could do something like Sabatini Zalal. That wouldn't be a bad idea. Zalal's already in the ranking, so he might have a little higher profile. Or you could do Steve Garcia after Garcia got pulled out of his fight with Edson Barboza. Garcia's another wild banger, so that would be pretty fun. I'd be willing to watch that. Or you could do the Mariscal-Sabatini rematch. Be a little cruel for Mariscal, but he's, I'm sure that's a fight he would love to have back. And, Mariscal has showed up so big in the UFC that, am I imagining that? Yeah, no, actually, no, that's right. The fight Sabatini would love to have back. Mariscal actually won that fight the first time. Never mind. So, yeah, that's a fight Sabatini would love to have back, I'm sure, and Mariscal's on a run, so you could do Sabatini, Mariscal too. Personally, I think I would say do Sabatini versus probably. I want to say Garcia, but I know that that's just setting myself up for more of this disappointment. So I'll say Sabatini Zalal. Zalal's fight against Cater was really uninspired. So I've been willing to see Zalal get knocked back. And Zalal also has the kind of game that could give Sabatini a lot of trouble just for how consistent he is on the back foot. All right. And for Brito, I don't know. You could do something like Ricardo Ramos for Joanderson Brito. That'd be fun. Or do, I mean, we did. C-Rod still needs to prove that he can beat somebody who has some experience under his belt. So Brito would be a hell of a test for that. I'd watch that. Anyway, somebody suggesting Sabatini versus Pico if they ever get Pico. Yeah, that'd be fun. I don't know what the hell if the UFC is ever going to do that, but I'm going to go C-Rod Brito. That seems like the fun idea to me. All right. That brings us to a catchweight bout. Chang Ho Lee against Cortavius Romeus. I cannot say that name without laughing a little internally. But yeah, I'm not convinced about the whole Korean Khabib thing, but this was a really good performance from Chang Ho Lee, a much better performance than I thought he was capable of. He was at the very least positionally insistent and pressuring and mindful of the positions he wanted to have Romeus in. He wasn't great at locking them down, but Romeus is the kind of fighter who, despite clearly being a very good athlete, will give up positions all the time for submissions. And he could only do that so many times, with Chang Ho Lee being really determined to hurt Romeus every time Chang Ho Lee got on top. So good performance from Chang Ho Lee, solid. Started locking down the fight as it went on, showed a lot of persistence and some good cardio. And yeah, a better fight than I thought he was capable of. It's a very sub UFC regional. It'd be like the best fight on a solid LFA card or something. But as a UFC level fight, it's two very scruffy grapplers with very wild games, and you're seeing the more persistent, the more positionally minded guy win that out. So solid, and hopefully Chang Ho Lee can keep improving on that, and maybe be a pretty good. If he can keep that cardio up and he can exercise that kind of physicality, then he could turn into a pretty good bantamweight down the road. He definitely seems like he's strong enough to be good in that division, and that's a very power-driven division. That brings us to a middleweight bout. Brad Tavares, Gerald Meerschaert, and my God, if this wasn't the most determined and inspired Brad Tavares that I have seen in years. Probably the most determined version of Brad Tavares I've seen since he beat Antonio Carlos Jr. in 2021. And that was still only good enough for a 29-28 against GM3. So I love the determination from Tavares, but like, it's one of those infinitely frustrating about Brad Tavares, even determined, even going out there and looking like he wanted to win. The man can't finish a ham sandwich. And it's like you rocked Gerald Meerschaert, and then we're like, man, I better back off and really take my time on this. I don't want to get in too deep against Gerald Meerschaert and risk getting hurt. So yeah, he won, and it keeps him kicking around in the middle of the middleweight division like he's been doing for feels like 20 years now. But I don't know. I guess that gets us excited for Brad Tavares versus Eric Anders. Have they fought before? Nope, they haven't. So Brad Tavares, Eric Anders it is. That's about as old uninspired middleweights as old uninspired middleweights get. I can't believe it hasn't happened. Definitely feels like it should have happened. Might as well make it happen. All right. That brings us to a flyweight bout. Oh, I guess for GM3, I don't know. There's got to be a kicking around and kicking around fighter for him out there. And I've got a bunch of spam coming into my thing. So I'm just going to delete that into the chat. All right. All right. Weird. Okay. All right. That gets us back to the. Yeah, I don't know what you do next for GM3. I don't know. Probably do something like do GM3 versus. Well, you could do GM3 versus Adolfo Vieira. That'd be pretty fun, actually. Be down for that after his loss to Andre Petroski. Seems like the fun thing to do. All right. Otherwise, that brings us to a flyweight bout: Ode Osborne versus Luis Gurule Gurule, and this was a quality fight. I did not actually think that this would be. I don't know. This was a good showing from Ode Osborne. I picked him to win this, but I really liked what he showed up with in this fight. Looked fast and looked like a. Okay, I really do not care about the MMA holes. This is not really something I care about. They are free to message me any other time, but I don't understand why they would want to be in my chat on my show. So, anyway, Ode Osborne, Luis Gurule. Osborne looked good, showed up well in this fight, and he is, this was a great use of his speed. Gurule is a pretty raw wrestler coming in, just fresh off the Contenders series. And Osborne has struggled a lot with speed or with maintaining his speed and his cardio over rounds. But he did well to show up in this fight and, perform well, especially after a bad first round. So I was pretty impressed with Ode Osborne. Gurule, this was a big ask for him. He's a pretty slow-footed, wrestling heavy fighter, and at flyweight, that's tough. And it's especially tough when you're then getting matched up with somebody like Osborne, who is really fast, even for that division. Yeah, he tends to kind of fade out, but it's not something that he, it's not something that Gurule has been used to dealing with. Yeah, no. I Eddie has it right. Eddie knows exactly how when to take his time now. He's going to school and shit. He's got a better things to do than watching UFC cards like this. So it's really just a me getting stuck on this one. But yeah, pretty good fight from Osborne. Really loved the knockout. Obviously, Gurule came on well and did well early in this, but he's very much a plod forward brawler, and I this was going to be a tough ask to fight a fighter as fast as Osborne. And in his debut, Osborne I know has lost a lot, but he's got a lot of cage time under his wings at this point. For Osborne, though, I mean, he called himself a dark horse contender in his post fight comments, and he's got such a long way to go for that. Fight with Andre Lima would be a lot of fun, though, or with even just somebody like Rafael Estevam, or honestly, actually, I think what I would do there is I would do a fight with Loner Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh has really needed to take side steps, and it seems like a fight with Osborne would be a very good sidestep from his last performance. Osborne has the experience, is really fast, can be a problem, but has some notable flaws. And yeah, so I'd love to see Kavanaugh versus Osborne next. That'd be a lot of fun. That brings us to a middleweight bout: Torres Finney, Robert Valentine, and man, this fight sucks. Like, I never want to have to say that Dana White was right to turn down a fighter, but he never should have backed off Torres Finney signing. That was just an absolutely no fun fighter to ever sign to the UFC's middleweight division. I mean, at his best as a 5'8", just bowling ball of a man, I cannot see how he's going to take steps up. And I don't know what the UFC is going to give him. Like, Robert Valentine is terrible. This was a match made in heaven for Torres Finney. Torres Finney is just not fun. Or he's a guy who's willing to give up a takedown to anybody rather. And Torres Finney just had to hold him down the whole time. He's too small and is just, I don't know, like, you can't really give him a step up. This was the easiest fight he could get, and he could just hold him down the whole time. I know, like, Tony Weeks is an idiot, and I know that he's terrible for boxing too, and trying to call him just a boxing guy is really dumb because he's been terrible in MMA forever now, and he's terrible in boxing. But I actually do love that Torres Finney scorecard, or that Valentine scorecard he gave 30-27 to Valentine. That was awesome, and I think it was really well. Like, morally, I feel like it was justified. I scored at 29-28 Finney, but if you're just going to hold somebody down, I have no problem with scoring a fight against you. And so, that was, I don't know. I really have no desire to see Torres Finney fighting in the UFC again. I don't know. I don't know who you match him up with. I think, yeah, Jesus, like, It's just no fun at all. Somebody mentioned Mansour Abdul Malik, and for an earlier fight, I think for Mearshart or for Tavares. And no, I would do like Finney versus Malik or Finney versus God, I don't know. It's just not fights I want to see him in. Yeah. Sign Duran Win for a fight again. But that was terrible. No fun at all. All right, that brings us to a women's flyweight bout. Diani Barbosa, Diana Belbita. And yeah, once again, I don't know why Belbita was still in the UFC. I don't know what the UFC is doing having her there. Diani Barbosa is a pretty good athlete and developing a decent game, and she just walked through Belbita. Really easy fight. Really bland matchmaking. No idea why you'd book this. So good win for Barbosa. Not a step up. Really stepped sideways for her at flyweight. Suppose that could lead to her to, I don't know, fight with. Oh, that's right. This is women's strawweight or women's flyweight, not strawweight. Somebody like well, did Veronica Hardy lose her? No, yeah, she did. She lost to Eduarda Moura. So yeah, do Eduarda Moura or somebody else on that level. Just somebody really raw in the division. Gabriela Fernandez or Carly Judice looked pretty good going back out last time. So yeah, I don't know. Pretty pointless fight. That brings us to a Reese McKee, Daniel Frunza. I'm really glad to see Reese McKee get a win here. And this was great to see Reese McKee get this win. McKee has been a quality fighter for Cage Warriors for a long time. I don't think he's got the athleticism to stay in the UFC and be a good fighter there, but he puts in a lot of work. He's a lot of fun. He's very aggressive, fights with real momentum and intention. So it was great to see him get a fighter like Frunza, which is very much the level he's used to succeeding against. And I feel bad for Frunza because, it's rare you see a cut stoppage in the UFC, honestly. And the cuts he had weren't bleeding so much that it seemed like they were unworkable, but that lip split was really bad. So I'm glad to see McKee get this, and he should be a gatekeeper just to can you fight at this level at all? If you can beat Reese McKee, then you're UFC caliber. If you can't, you're not. So that's really this was the right level for McKee, and at this level, he's a really fun fighter. So hopefully they can keep him with that. I don't really, like I say, you sort of have to keep him fighting the worst guys in the welterweight division. So I don't really know that there's a good fight to make coming off of this. Just somebody like Basel Hafez or Gilbert Urbina or something like that. Or yeah, maybe a rematch against old Alex Morono now that Morono's fading. That'd be fun. But yeah, Reese McKee, when he's in fights he can win, then I'm happy to see Reese McKee. All right, that brings us to a strawweight bout. Loma Lookboonmee, Estela Nunes. And yeah, this is, I don't know what they're doing with Loma Lookboonmee as well. This was a fight that, I get it. You can't really give her big steps up because this was a small step or this was a step sideways, and it just did nothing for her. But she made the kind of catastrophic errors that could almost see Nunes win the fight. Like, I didn't have Nunes winning it, but you could give Nunes either of the first 2 rounds and it would not have been terrible. So they really need to find something more meaningful for Lukbunmi. I mean, I hate to feed her to a young prospect, but a fight with Fatima Klein would even be more meaningful, or a fight with, really, I think she should be pecking away at the bottom of the division, of the rankings. So, that would be a fight with, like, I mean, unfortunately, Tisha Pennington is booked against Luana Pinheiro, but you could do a rematch against Angela Hill. I'd be up for that. Or even a rematch against Lupi Godinez. Or the winner of Pinheiro Pennington. I don't know, just something, give the woman a chance to actually take steps forward. At the very least, give her somebody like, I don't know, Sam Hughes or something. Sam Hughes versus, but that's even a rematch. She's already lost to Lukbunmi, so I don't know. It's one of the toughest fighters to match up in that division because she's very unlikely to succeed moving forward, but she's beating so many of the fighters at the bottom that it doesn't make any sense to just keep her down there fighting absolute nobodies. So yeah, I guess you do. You either wait for the winner of Pinheiro Pennington, or you try to get a Hill rematch, or you match her up with the top prospect like Fatima Klein and see what you can do with it. Probably have to say the Klein fight. Hate to do it, but that seems like the best idea that I can come up with. That brings us to a bantamweight bout: Victor Henry, Pedro Falcao. And Henry is, I mean, he's kind of in the same place, honestly, as a fighter like Loma Lookboonmee, where he's really experienced, really generally decent, but even he talked about after the fight, like, he just does not have power, and he wants to fight with power, but without that power, a fight against Pedro Falcao that should have been a pretty simple, straightforward matchup for him. Falcao was able to get himself back in this fight regularly and make it look a lot closer than it should have, just because Henry couldn't put him away and couldn't be physically dominant enough to maintain momentum. So you could match Henry up with somebody like, I mean, yeah, geez. I don't know. You'd be guys like Callan Loughran or well, actually, no. There's the idea. Match Henry up with Alexander Topuria. That's the right fight. He's a real vet. Topuria is not, he's not, not that experienced, but he is 29 and he has been coached to one of the best fighters out there, and he has a veteran's game. Feels like the right kind of fight to move Topuria up the division, and it's enough of a name that it's a meaningful fight for Henry. So I'd say do Henry Topuria. That's actually a really good, fun fight and a useful fight for Topuria, or for Henry to take. All right. That brings us finally to Martin Budai, Uran Satibaldiev. And somebody asked earlier if Satibaldiev looks good enough to make something of himself in the light heavyweight division. And yeah, I kind of thought he might have won this fight, honestly. I would have given him, I think it was trying to remember now if it was the first and the third or just the first. Yeah, I think it was the first and the third round, maybe. But I'm not surprised Budai won it. Yeah, that's right. Budai got rocked in the third. That's what it was. And Sadi Baldiev, at the very least, he looked consistent. He was throwing straight, which was good to see. It's not something he's done a lot of on the regionals. He tends to like to sit in front of people and wing wild hooks. The thing that really gives him a prayer down at 205 is that he's very much a blanketing top control kind of fighter. And he didn't have the strength to do that against Budai, but just hanging tough and showing a good chin and being busy and being willing to stand in and make the fight messy and have a chance to win it on no notice. That doesn't, that says okay things to me for a division like 205, where being fast and powerful and messy is usually the right way to win. Sadi Baldiev being a lockdown top control guy who is very who might be very tough for that division, could make him a good gatekeeper to the top 15 or something like that. I think Chad here has it right. Probably not explosive enough to be a really top tier light heavyweight, but could slot in that sort of oh man, let me actually find the right comp here at light heavyweight. Potentially, Nikita Krylov has actually been around to make something of himself in that division, but could slot in sort of a Marcin Prachnio or Alonzo Menafield, Iwan Kudalaba kind of way, or Devin Clark. Yeah, that kind of gatekeeper to the top 15. Not great, but if he's durable enough, then that could carry him up that division, because a lot of light heavyweights are very powerful but not very durable. So if he's just got a great chin and a lockdown top game, that could make a lot of work for him. All right, and that brings us finally to Talita Alanzar versus Vanessa Demopoulos, and a super predictable loss for Vanessa Demopoulos. Could not stop herself even for an instant for grappling with a much better grappler. Alanzar just she's a world-class grappler, and Demopoulos loves to work her jiu-jitsu game, but it's not, I think she might even be a jiu-jitsu black belt. I'm trying to remember here. Let's see, Vanessa Demopoulos is actually, that's not listed, but if she is a black belt, then it's not anywhere the kind of black belt of Alanzar or Amarim, the level of grapplers she's been tangling with lately on the ground, and it shows really clearly when she has to face those kinds of fighters. And so, yeah, a really predictable win for Alanzar. Not something that necessarily makes any difference for her career just because it is so predictable, but, set Alanzar up for a fight with Alexa Thainara after Thainara's win over Molly McCann or something like that, and see if she can go somewhere. Or, Amarim versus Alanzar is a totally reasonable fight. That is not a bad idea either. So, I don't know. Just kind of a meaningless card overall. Can't even be really, really mad at all the people spamming this and trying to ruin the show, because honestly, this was destined to be a pretty terrible post-fight show, low energy, no matter what. So, on that note, I'm going to wrap it. You can find me, as always, at the Zane Simon on Twitter and at Zane Simon on Blue Sky and over on Zane Simon on Substack. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Remember to subscribe, not to this, but to our Substack channel, which is linked in the bio. and we won't have any bonus content for subscribers tonight. No Eddie, but we'll be back for UFC 314 and pick it up for then. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and see you next time.